You ever notice how some older folks who live alone don't seem lonely at all? I mean, really. You visit them, and they've got this calm, quiet glow about them. They're not rushing, not complaining, not chasing anything. They're sitting on their porch with a mug of tea like they figured out something the rest of us haven't. Well, today, I want to take you inside that world. The world of older people who prefer living alone, and the amazing, underrated qualities they've developed because of it. And let me tell you, it's not what most people think. So whether you're living solo yourself, know someone who is, or you're just curious what real peace looks like later in life, stick around. You might just see your future self in a whole new light. Number 1, they've mastered the art of inner companionship. You know what's funny? When you're young, being alone feels like punishment. It's that go to your room and think about what you've done kind of silence. But something magical happens as you grow older. That same silence becomes a kind of homecoming. I've heard this again and again from seniors who live by themselves. They're not just okay with being alone, they've turned it into an art form. Take Harold, for example, retired carpenter. Lived most of his life surrounded by noise. Kids, hammers, a wife who always had the radio blasting 1950s crooners. But now, at 76, Harold's mornings are quiet. Just him, a black coffee, and the sound of the birds that somehow still find his ragged little birdhouse charming. He told me once, "At first, I missed the chaos. Now? I talk to myself more than I probably should, but at least the conversation's honest." Then he grinned. That's the heart of it. These older folks have figured out how to enjoy their own company, not just tolerate it, not fill it with noise or distractions, but savor it. One lady I read about online, a widow named Elaine, has a nightly ritual. She pours herself a small glass of wine, plays her favorite Ella Fitzgerald record, and talks out loud to her late husband as if he's still sitting across from her. He always hated this song, she laughs, but now he's stuck listening. She's not losing her mind. She's keeping her heart alive. That's the difference. The truth is, mastering inner companionship means you've stopped waiting for someone else to complete you. You don't need an audience to laugh or a witness to feel joy. You become your own best friend, the kind who knows your favorite cereal, forgives your forgetfulness, and still shows up every morning with a smile in the mirror. 2. They've reclaimed their time and guard it like gold. Let me tell you, there's something almost sacred about an older person who lives alone and no longer lets anyone else run their clock. These folks don't wear watches to keep track of time. They wear them because they like how it looks with their flannel shirt. You remember how life used to be? Every hour scheduled, every day spoken for. Pick up the kids at 3. Dinner at 6. Don't forget Aunt Martha's birthday on the 12th. Your calendar wasn't yours. It was a battlefield of other people's needs. But something shifts when you live alone in your older years. You start to own your minutes again. Marjorie, a 72-year-old I met through an online gardening group, has what she calls slow start Thursdays. She doesn't do anything before noon. No appointments, no favors, not even answering the phone unless it's her daughter or someone calling to tell her she's won the lottery. And if it's a robocall, she answers in a fake French accent just to amuse herself. She told me, "I spent 40 years waking up to alarms and people tugging at my time. Now the only thing tugging me is my cat when I forget breakfast." Older folks who live alone treat their time like a luxury item. They don't waste it on drama. They don't hand it over easily. They know exactly how precious a quiet morning is, or a nap at 2:17 p.m. just because their body says so. And the thing is, they don't feel guilty about it. They've let go of the hustle, the guilt trips, the sense that resting makes you lazy. Now, if they want to sit in a recliner with a book they've already read 4 times, they'll do it, with joy. If they want to watch a game show and yell at the contestants like it's a sport, they go right ahead. Their time is theirs. Finally, there's freedom in that, and a kind of quiet revenge too. Because in a world obsessed with speed, these older folks chose slowness, on purpose. And that's something most people won't understand until they're lucky enough to get there themselves. 3. They've developed a fierce sense of self-reliance, without losing their softness. There's this woman named Bernice. I met her through a friend's church potluck, though she doesn't actually attend. She just shows up when there's pie. Anyway, Bernice is 81, widowed 15 years now, lives alone with her dog Winston, who's half blind and barks at shadows. And let me tell you, Bernice is tough. I once saw her change a porch light bulb while standing on a bucket, holding a screwdriver in her mouth. When someone offered help, she said, "Honey, I gave birth in a blizzard. I think I can handle a light bulb." But here's the twist. She's not hardened. She still cries when her lilies bloom in spring. She still writes birthday cards in perfect cursive with little smiley faces next to every name. She's the first to bake cookies when someone on the block is going through a hard time. And every Christmas, she knits scarves for the mailman's kids, whether they wear them or not. That's what I mean by this special kind of self-reliance. See, a lot of people think being independent means closing off, being cold, suspicious, unwilling to ask for anything. But older people who've lived alone for years, they've figured out the sweet spot. They can handle a flat tire, remember every medication in their cabinet, fix a leaky faucet, or at least know how to YouTube it without having a meltdown. And still have the tenderness to stop and watch a butterfly land on their windowsill. It's this quiet confidence like, I've been through the ringer, but I didn't let it wrinkle me. They've survived heartbreaks, bills they weren't sure they'd pay, friends who've come and gone, maybe even estrangement from people they once loved deeply. And they kept going. Not because they had to prove anything, but because they refused to lose their softness along the way. Honestly, it's inspiring. They're like those quilts passed down from grandma. Stitched tough, worn in all the right places, but still warm enough to wrap yourself in. 4. They've fine-tuned their BS radar. Now this one's a gem. If you ever want to know if someone's lying, don't hire a private detective. Just bring them over to Miss Thelma's house and let her watch them talk for 10 minutes. She'll tell you by the way they blink. Older folks who live alone have spent so much time in their own company. Their minds are sharp, even if their knees aren't. They've heard every excuse in the book, every sales pitch, every too sweet, "I'm just checking in," that's really a backdoor to asking for money or favors. There was this fella named George, Vietnam vet, lived down the street from my cousin, who said, "After 70, you can smell fake sincerity like old milk in the sun." And he wasn't wrong. You'll notice it in how older solo dwellers choose their company. They don't entertain nonsense anymore. They don't smile politely at people who drain their energy. If someone's just there for gossip or to stir up drama, you'll see a senior quietly slide into their "I have a casserole in the oven" excuse and disappear like a magician. But here's the thing. They don't do it rudely. Oh no, they're not bitter. They just know better. They've had enough time, enough years, enough heartbreaks and headaches to learn what's real and what's noise. They've learned to listen not just to what people say, but to what their eyes do, how their voice shifts, how their energy feels when they walk into a room. One woman online joked, "I don't even need someone to lie to me anymore. My hip starts aching if they're dishonest." Honestly, I believe her. And with all that wisdom, you'd think they'd become cynical. But most haven't. That's the beauty of it. They've become selective, not suspicious. They're still warm, but they keep the thermostat low until you prove you're worth the heat. They've built quiet lives that don't need chaos, and they protect that peace like a mama bear guarding her cubs. Except in this case, the cub is their recliner and remote control. So when someone shows up with flattery, drama, or ulterior motives, these folks don't confront. They don't argue. They just smile and gently walk away. Because nothing feels better, at that age, than not getting pulled into other people's storms. 5. They've cultivated daily rituals that feel sacred. Now listen, when you live alone for a while, especially in your older years, your days aren't dictated by anyone else's clock anymore. And instead of everything falling into chaos, something beautiful often happens. Rituals begin to bloom. Not the kind of rituals with robes and candles, unless you're into that. No judgment. I'm talking about those small, meaningful acts that give life rhythm, a heartbeat, a soul. Take this man I knew, Leonard, 82, retired postal worker, lived alone after his wife passed away. Every single morning, like clockwork, he'd get up, shave with an old-fashioned safety razor, the kind that could take off your nose if you weren't careful, put on a button-down shirt, even if he was just staying home, and sit at his kitchen table with a cup of black coffee and one slice of toast, always cut diagonally. "Tastes better that way," he'd say. Science still hasn't confirmed that, but Leonard swore by it. Then he would read the same newspaper, cover to cover. And heaven help you if you call during that sacred time. "Unless you're bleeding or the house is on fire," he told me once, "don't interrupt my crossword." To someone else, that routine might look simple, even boring. But not to Leonard. To him, it was a grounding ritual, something steady in a world that had shifted a lot over the years. And that's the thing, friend. When you live alone, your routines aren't about productivity anymore. They're about connection. Sometimes to the past, a smell, a sound, a favorite mug from a long-gone vacation. Sometimes to yourself, just a way to check in with your own heart. You start lighting a candle before dinner just because it makes the meal feel special. You hum the same tune while folding laundry like your mother used to do. You sit on the porch every evening at exactly 6 p.m. to watch the world dim, not for any big reason, but because the way the sun hits that one tree at that exact time just feels right. These aren't just habits. They're love notes to yourself. They're little rituals that remind you that this life, even in its quietest form, is worth celebrating. 6. They know how to entertain themselves like champs. Now this one makes me smile every time. Because if there's one thing you learn real quick living alone, especially later in life, it's how to keep yourself company without needing bells, whistles, or someone constantly in your ear. Older people who live alone, they're pros at amusement. Absolute professionals. Take Mabel, for instance. She's 76, lives in a small cottage just outside town, and every Thursday she throws what she calls her dinner and drama night. It's just her, a frozen lasagna, a glass of red wine, and 3 episodes of her favorite British murder mystery show. She even pauses the show to guess who the killer is and yells at the screen when she's wrong. "It was the butler! Again! I should have known! He had shifty eyebrows!" Or there's Carl, Vietnam vet, slow talker, quick wit. Carl told me he plays a game with himself every week where he tries to cook something new with whatever's left in the fridge. "Tuesday, I made something that looked like a casserole but tasted like revenge," he chuckled. "Still ate it. Waste not." They'll pick up odd little hobbies too. Painting, even if they've never painted before. Bird-watching, crossword puzzles, building miniature ships inside bottles, even though they can't quite see straight. There's no shame. They're not doing it to impress anyone. They're doing it because they're curious still. Because they know life doesn't stop being interesting just because you're not sharing it with a house full of people. One older lady online, I remember this so clearly, said she gives each day of the week a theme. Mondays are movie days. Tuesdays are try something new days. She recently tried sushi for the first time and called it cold fish regret. Wednesdays? Window shopping online. Not buying, just building carts she never checks out. "It's like digital paper dolls," she wrote. And here's the secret. It's not about filling time. It's about enjoying it. They found a way to play again. To rediscover the kind of imagination we all had as kids. when a cardboard box could be a castle, or a rainy afternoon could become an adventure. They're not afraid to laugh at their own jokes. They sing out loud, even when their voice wobbles. They might talk to their plants, or the TV, or the cat. And you know what? That's not strange. That's alive. You don't have to be surrounded by people to feel entertained. You just have to be willing to play a little. These seniors, they've remembered how. 7. They're courageous enough to choose peace over noise. You want to talk about real courage? Let's not talk about skydiving or climbing mountains. Let's talk about someone in their 60s, 70s, or 80s who finally says, "You know what? I don't need all this noise anymore." That's bravery. Take Samuel, retired mechanic, lived with his daughter and her 2 teenage boys for 5 years after his wife passed. He loved them truly. But one day, he just knew he was done with the yelling, the clanging pots, the 24-hour TV channels, the phone vibrating on the table like it was having a seizure. He told me, "I love my family, but I got tired of feeling like I lived inside a washing machine on spin cycle." So he moved into a quiet little one-bedroom place on the edge of town. No fanfare, no bitterness, just peace. And now? He wakes up every morning to the sound of birds instead of arguments over who used the last of the milk. That, my friend, is not weakness. That is choosing yourself. That's the kind of boldness most people never reach, the kind where you realize that your nervous system deserves calm, that your heart deserves space, that silence isn't something to fear, it's something to nurture. I once read a comment from a woman named Gloria on a video about older folks living alone. She said, "I finally stopped going to every church group, family dinner, and neighborhood meeting just because I felt obligated. My peace is more important than anyone's expectations now. I still love people. I just don't want to host their drama." She didn't say it with anger. She said it with a cup of tea in one hand and her cat curled up in the other. That's power. That's liberation. See, when you're younger, the world convinces you that being involved all the time is a sign of life. But when you get older and wiser, and maybe find yourself living alone, you realize that peace is not passive. Peace is a choice, a daily, gutsy, glorious choice. And it's not about cutting people off or becoming some kind of mountain hermit. It's about building your life like a garden, trimming the weeds, saying no to the pests, and giving yourself permission to just sit and breathe in the quiet without guilt. That takes guts, and the folks who do it, they glow differently. 8. They see beauty in the ordinary that most people overlook. Now this right here, this is one of my favorite things about older people who live alone. They notice what the rest of the world is too busy to see. The gentle, humble, blink and you'll miss it kind of beauty. I remember a woman named Elsie, 84, wore floral house dresses and always had a Werther's Original in her purse, who once told me, "Every morning I watch the sun rise over the neighbor's garage. It's nothing special, but the way it hits that rusty gutter at just the right angle looks like gold. And that's how I start my day. With gold." Now that is perspective. See, when you spend a lot of time alone, and you're not rushing for anyone or performing for anyone, your senses come alive in new ways. You hear the soft click of the toaster. You smell the rain before it hits. You notice when the same squirrel comes back 3 days in a row, and you start rooting for him like he's a contestant on a cooking show. There's beauty in the rhythm of the ordinary. Folding laundry fresh out of the dryer, still warm. The sound of wind rattling the windows just slightly during a storm. The way your favorite chair sighs a little when you sit in it, like it's glad you came back. And let's not forget the little rituals that become full-blown emotional moments, like watering plants, not because they're expensive or exotic, but because they're alive, and you're responsible for them. Or boiling eggs exactly the way you like them, because you've finally stopped compromising on breakfast. Or playing an old song that brings back someone who's gone. Not with sadness, but with gratitude. A man named Cliff once wrote online, "I live alone, But I've never felt more connected to the world. I know when the robins return. I see the first daffodil bloom. I say good morning to the moon when it's still hanging on after sunrise. These things keep me company. That's not loneliness. That's presence. In a world where everyone's chasing the next big thrill, the older folks living alone have become fluent in the language of simplicity. They're not trying to escape boredom. They've befriended it. They found the sparkle in a dust mote floating through sunlight, the poetry in an old dog's sigh, the romance in making a perfect cup of tea for one. And I'll tell you what, that kind of seeing, that kind of deep noticing, that's a superpower most of us never get around to learning. But the ones who do, they live richer, deeper, quieter lives than most millionaires. 9. They're surprisingly adventurous, on their own terms. Here's the thing about older folks living alone. Just because they aren't skydiving or taking selfies at Machu Picchu doesn't mean they've lost their taste for adventure. In fact, most of them are more adventurous than they were in their younger years. They've just redefined what adventure looks like. I knew this woman, Joyce, 79, fiercely independent, full of sass, with a walker that had pink tassels hanging off the handles like a Harley. Joyce used to tell people, "I don't climb mountains anymore. Now I climb new experiences." And she meant it. Last year, she taught herself how to order groceries online. Took her 2 weeks, 6 phone calls to her granddaughter, and one very confused Instacart driver who delivered 2 gallons of almond milk by accident. But she figured it out. "That was my Everest," she said, laughing. And you know what? It was. See, for older people who live alone, adventure doesn't always mean packing bags and booking flights. Sometimes it's going to a cafe alone for the first time in years and staying for hours. Sometimes it's joining a painting class on a whim, or learning how to bake sourdough just because a YouTube grandma told them it was good for the soul. Sometimes it's deciding, at 83, to try sushi for the first time and declaring it cold fish on rice, but not terrible. There's a man I read about online, George, widowed in his 70s. He saved up and took a solo Amtrak ride across the country because he always loved the sound of trains, but never had the time. Said he met more interesting people in the dining car than he had in years. "And the meatloaf wasn't half bad," he added, like that was the cherry on top. That's the thing. Older solo dwellers don't take life for granted. They know how quickly things can change, how fleeting good health and freedom can be. So when they say yes to something, even something small, they mean it. They savor it. Their adventures might not make the evening news, but they make a quiet kind of history in their own lives. And best of all, they don't need anyone's approval to do it. They've earned the right to explore at their own pace, to step outside their comfort zones without fanfare. No audience, no likes, just curiosity and courage. And honestly, that's the bravest kind of adventure there is. 10. They've redefined what it means to be content. Now here's the last one, and it runs deeper than most folks understand. You see, most of us are taught from a young age that contentment is something you reach after you've accomplished 100 things. After the career, the family, the house, the savings, the travel, the success. After proving yourself again and again. Then maybe, if you're lucky, you'll feel content. But older people who live alone, they know better. They've flipped that story on its head. I once met a man named Walter, 85 years old, former accountant, quiet as a snowfall. He lived alone in a modest little house with a screened-in porch and a stack of crossword books next to his recliner. I asked him once, "Walter, what's the best part of your day?" He thought for a second and said, "Right around 4:30. I make a cup of tea, sit on the porch, and listen to the wind in the trees. That sound, it's like the earth sighing. Reminds me I'm still here." That was it. No luxury cruise, no award ceremony, just wind and tea. And that's the thing about these folks. They've let go of the chase. They don't need their happiness to be loud. They're not comparing their lives to anyone else's because they finally realize something most people never do. Enough is enough. Enough love, even if it came and went. Enough laughter, even if now it's quieter. Enough beauty, even if it's tucked in a windowsill geranium or a favorite blanket that smells like lavender and memories. I saw a comment once that said, "I used to think I needed to be surrounded by people to feel happy. Now I find joy in watching the light move across my living room floor in the afternoon. Took me 73 years to slow down enough to see it." That right there? That's the gold. Contentment isn't about settling. It's about seeing. Seeing what's right in front of you and deciding, this is good. This is enough. I'm okay here. Older people who live alone aren't aimless or forgotten. Many of them are exactly where they want to be. They've stopped measuring life in milestones and started measuring it in moments. And those moments, however small, are sacred to them. That quiet cup of coffee. That rerun of a show they've seen a dozen times but still love. That familiar creak in the floor that reminds them they're home. So if the world tries to convince you that contentment has to be grand or showy or earned through exhaustion, just think of Walter and his 4:30 tea. Think of that breeze through the trees. Think of all the people quietly living their truth and smiling while they do it. So there it is, my friend. 10 amazing, quietly powerful qualities of older folks who've chosen the solo life. Not because they had no other option, but because they finally realized they didn't have to answer to noise anymore. These are people who've turned quiet mornings into sacred rituals, turned simplicity into strength, and found peace in their own company. They aren't waiting for the world to knock. They've already let themselves in, made a pot of coffee, and found the joy right there in the stillness. And if you're walking a similar path, or maybe even hoping to, I hope you see now that living alone doesn't mean life is smaller. Sometimes it means it's finally just the right size. Now, if this spoke to you, do me a favor. Hit that like button, subscribe if you haven't, and share this with someone who needs a little reminder that quiet living can be a beautiful, brave choice. Until next time, keep finding joy in the ordinary and don't forget to butter your toast diagonally. It really does taste better that way.